in the second part of the session, so I think it was a very useful first part of the session, in which I think the main message that I got, at least as a researcher, was that we need to do more on this. I mean, we need to talk more to people who are used to thinking about how to visualize data. And in particular, one of the things that I was thinking most of the time is that a paper is not the same, a scientific paper is not the same as a seminar, and it's not the same as making things widely public, right? To make things available for the public. So, but in any case, I think many of the tips that were discussed during the session can be applied to make our research, to make it wider, to make our seminars better, and even to make our papers better. One of the main lessons I was thinking about is one thing that I hate actually is when working with co-authors, and co-authors put all the graphs and all the charts at the end of the paper, right? And one of the things I was listening to some of the speakers saying was, look, it is important not only choosing the right chart and thinking about the title and thinking about the graphics and the colors you're going to use. It's very, very important where you place your chart and where you place your thing. And you should place it at the beginning if you really want to, if you want to make to have people, pay attention to it. So just putting things at the end of the paper where people have to browse back and forth, it may not be the best communicating skill we want to teach our students. As you see, we asked these two questions on Mentimeter. Some of you answered, not that many, but Clodagh, if you can go to the second slide, that would be great. Some of the answers I think are going to prompt the discussion I want to have, in which basically I don't want to be the one speaking. I want to let everybody have a chance to mention some of the topics. I'm going to go to Padlet and look at and talk about what is there. But before we do that, let me mention one of our committee members, Eileen, wanted to talk a little bit about her experience teaching about data visualization. So I think it's a nice way to start the discussion. And from then on, I will I will let people speak. I will just ask you, I will moderate it in order, but let's start with Eileen, and please let's take it from then on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro. So hello, everyone. I'm Eileen. I'm a new committee member, and I'm a senior lecturer at Queen Mary University of London. So there are two things I wanted to say. So the first one is what we do at Queen Mary to teach students data visualization skills and communicating with data. Is that they have a course in the first year, the first term of the first year, where they go through, we teach them how to do Excel basically. And so we walk them through some skills, and they have to do some assessment. And this year we're actually collaborating with the Language Center at Queen Mary to teach them more about the communication skills. So this is something that's completely new, and we're not sure how it's going to work, but it sounds it's going to be quite exciting, where half of the course is going to be in data analysis, and then half of the course will be some people from the Language Center are going to come in and talk to the students, and students will be doing exercises on actually writing, because in economics courses in the UK, sometimes students can get through a good part of the way through the course without actually having written something formally, or they don't do that very much, not like in some other courses. So our plan is to help them get more proficient with communicating clearly, both in the academic style, but also for non-specialist audiences as well. And the second thing that I wanted to say was in terms of good resources. So Clodagh has already posted a link to doing economics in the chat box. But this is a project that I've been working on as part of the core project. And it has a lot of, for those of you who teach data visualization or data analysis at the very introductory level, it has a lot of different projects that are related to real world issues like inequality, well-being, climate change. And so there's lots of ideas that you can use for teaching, but it can also be used for students as a self-learning resource for how to learn Excel or how to learn R as well. So those are just two things that I wanted to say to start off the discussion.
Thank you, Eileen. So let's let everybody who wants to speak speak. I think there are two questions that I would like to start the debate with. One that appears in Paddle is about when to teach about data visualization. So in particular, we have we may have some kind of conflict between how much data analysis our students can do and how they present it. So it is better that first they learn data analysis and then they learn how to build the data. Should we do these things together at the same time? And in particular, is there a trade-off between teaching them fancy ways of communicating and not going deep enough when doing the analysis of the data. In particular, it was funny when some of the speakers in the first part of the session when we're talking, I think that the last speakers started saying, okay, now we're going to talk about serious things, right? And I could see, some of the journalists at the beginning of the session going like, hey, what I was presenting was also serious. So, how serious is how serious and how important is to deal with this trade-off between communicating effectively and getting the message through, but also being able to communicate complex data analysis, right? And do we have the balance right in the way we are teaching? Are we putting too much too much emphasis on the econometrics and too little in the communication? Well, those are questions that I leave for you. So anybody who wants to speak, now it's the time. This is the moment where everybody gets shy and waits for others to speak. So, Kiko, for example, now that I have you there, I see you're a journalist and you're not an economist. So were you particularly offended with this comment about, this is serious, what is serious, what is not? Let's start with that.
No, not at all. One of the things I have been learning is that everything is really serious. I think when I'm an engineer, I have a background in engineering, and when I came to journalism, I thought that journalism was not that complex, and I found that it was. So this is I think is a universal thing. Regarding your question, I think that it's difficult to decide when to start talking about communication with your students. But I think that maybe one way of dealing with it is the writing stuff, how to write well. I think it's a very basic for a curriculum. So I think that may be something to start very early. So you are doing economics, for instance, but you have to communicate, you have to write, you have to know how to do it, because your role is to discover things and then convince people to do things. And so I think that you can start by how to write. How to write is a very simple concept. So maybe you can start that at the beginning of the curriculum, and then at the end of the degree, talk about that data visualization, how to communicate complexity, how to do storytelling, more fancy stuff, but maybe take into account for the beginning that you have to communication is relevant.
So I think that's an important message. This is not only about communicating data. Of course, we are communicators also of our research, and we should learn how to do presentations, but also how to write. And one of the things that's been on the discussion on Twitter lately, it's been about, whether we are teaching our students all these skills individually as PhD advisors, instead of having courses about how to write, how to communicate the data, how to do the presentations, right? Should it be part of the training of a PhD student, of the coursework of a PhD student, all these things, because they're very, very important, and they are becoming even more important nowadays, right? So I think what you're suggesting of having the correct sequence, perhaps start with the writing, then with how you deal with the data, and finally how you present it in public. I mean, think about something that will be very useful. We have Tim Barnett who raised his hand, so please go.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Let me just lower my hand here. Okay, so it's a really interesting question that you raise about, when do you introduce the data analysis stuff, and you immediately start talking about, do you go do the complex econometrics and then talk about how you present the results? And I think that really brings to mind a problem I see it in as a problem that I see in economics and teaching of econometrics, that we almost get into the complex stuff too quickly. So students don't understand the importance of visualizations. So, and we've all seen it that, the moment students can do a linear regression using Stata or R, they tend to just go straight into it. They ignore the data, they ignore everything, and they just get into, they think that complex is better. And in a way that I think we should just be spending more time right at the very start of a course. I mean, well, if you think that most students who study undergraduate economics are probably not going to go into postgrad study, they're not going to do PhDs. Most of them are going to go into the world of work and even potentially be in public facing and trying to produce stuff for public consumption. So yeah, so my view is really that actually we need to spend much more time right at the very start, not just teaching, if you like, the technical hard skills of how you design diagrams using R, using Stata, or even Excel. Excel should probably be used more. But also crucially, really encouraging students to think critically about which diagrams to use in what setting and who's the target audience, because all these things make a big difference. So yeah, I think I've just kind of completely lost my track, but I hope that made sense.
It does. It definitely does. So some people on the chat, they were saying, let me see if I can get through. They were talking about a possible trade-off, which is, you know, if you focus too much on the communication part, you may be focusing on just the important message without understanding the subtleties of those data, right, and the context of that data. So if anybody wants to elaborate on that, that would be great. Marco also raised his hand. Marco, if you want.
Yes. So first of all, Pedro, I don't think I said that the topic would be more serious.
It was a joke, Marco.
Okay.
It was a joke.
Okay. No, just to be clear about that. Yeah. Okay. But for sure, it was a different topic, and maybe I can pick up on something that Tim said that I think is very valuable. That is, there is too much complexity in what is taught nowadays in universities. I think complexity meant as a way to nobilitate the analysis. If it's not complex, then it's not good. This is not at all the case. We have so much information, and the ability to do very simple analysis, even descriptive analysis, is already a huge skill. And I can tell you that what we see, and also interacting with many other people, it's a skill that we're deeply missing at the moment. The ability to describe systems, the ability to describe the data, the ability to use good metrics to capture the phenomena that you're interested in. And one of the things that we see is that there is much more value in finding explanatory power to what immediately, like jump into the explanation. And I tend to tell also our colleagues that join us, let's avoid the explanations. Let's be agnostic. Let's be as impartial as we can in approaching the data. Now, in terms of skills, this requires, I think, two main things that we see. I mean, we talk from the perspective of data scientists. Not everybody is a data scientist, but still they want to work on visualization. There are three main skills. So we need people who are good with math and statistics, people who know how to program and understand the principles of computing, at least to some degree. And finally, people who really have a keen interest in research and understanding the business the latter point is very difficult to teach. I agree. At the same time, I think it would be very, very important to make things much simpler than we see sometimes in certain certain environments. And in particular, if you want to teach skills that are that can be used, at least in the work that we do, really principles rather than tools. So we don't even care if you know how to program MATLAB or Python. As long as you can program, you can pick up any other things.
Lola, you raise your hand.
Yeah, so I just wanted to pick up on this point about it being sort of with the econometrics course or the statistics course, because actually I think a lot of it should really be with the economics courses or even the topics courses. So if you're teaching trade, that's where you bring up some trade data and get students used, because that's where the story is. So as long as we sort of assume that data presentation is linked to statistics and econometrics, then I think it is quite hard for the econometrics lecturers to do everything that they need to do and also do this skill, whereas it's much easier to get that message across that this is about telling a story about economics with data in the economics. And in that context, you can do it from first year. I mean, we do it at UCL that they have to write a 500 word or 300 word thing this year, I think, where they have to use 2 pieces of data to back up their idea. And all these points about does the chart go at the end or in the middle, all of that comes up in the feedback. So I think trying to pull away from it being about the data analysis and the econometrics would help to get the focus on the communicating a story with data quite a lot.
So in that sense, many of you are actually asking questions about the resources and provide a list of available resources. So we're going to do that, right? Some of the speakers already agree on sharing their slides, and they did on the chat. They provided a link to their slides. Many of you are asking for Davide's first slide from, I think it was from the Financial Times, in which there was this beautiful slide with all type of charts, all the classification. If we could have that slide, we would really appreciate it, because a lot of people are asking for it. Please come back to the webpage of the committee, where we will be making all these resources, everything that we have available, so that we can continue the discussion. Tim, you also wanted to contribute.
Sorry, yeah, I feel like I'm somewhat monopolizing this chat, so apologies. Yeah, so just to go back to something that Claude just said, and something that was raised on the chat by, where are we? Estelle, so thank you. And it also comes back to this idea about kind of normalizing soft skills and helping students to make decisions. And one thing that I think we shouldn't be doing with this type of stuff is, if you like, compartmentalizing it within econometrics or dedicated statistics modules, because then students can kind of psychologically say, this belongs to statistics or econometrics, as opposed to actually being able to present data across any sort of economics module is really, really important. So it's basically whether or not, rather than compartmentalizing it, putting it just within your statistics modules, actually the inclusion of data visualization skills and the ability to explain data in the correct context is actually something that belongs more at a program level and needs to be integrated within all modules, whether it's economic history and presenting historical economic data, or within core theory or micro modules or something like that. So yeah, so I'm kind of with Claude, I think, on this.
Very good, thank you. Somebody's asking in the chat, Claude, perhaps you can answer this one. They are asking about whether the recorded session will be available afterwards, whether we can make it available.
So it'll be put onto the YouTube, and then we'll connect to it on the Education Committee page as well.
Okay, and one question that actually, Claudia, you were asking, and I think it's very relevant, given that we have our panelists here, is, many of you were not economists by training, but you are doing some of the work perhaps some of us should be doing, right? So the question is, how did you learn those skills? What should we do? What should we do to be up to speed to the way you present your data? How can we learn these things? How did you learn the things? So Davide, for example, I can see.
Yeah, mostly I learned it by doing. When I started, data journalism was really at its beginnings. So I did a small course when I studied science communication, and there was not very much more than that. So most of the things that I learned them by doing them. And also, this is a really interesting lesson, I think, about which tools do I use. I get this question all the time. I like the chart. How do I do it? Which tools do I need to learn? And the answer is really unsatisfactory, because there really isn't one that is better than all the others. Depends on what you need to do. And also, you don't really have a way to know that in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, that tool will even exist. Most of the tools I used 3 years ago do not exist anymore. So it's really a matter of being flexible and I mean, being maybe quick to learn things, but there really isn't just one thing that you can learn besides trying new things and see which work out for what you want to do.
Kiko, you also raised your hand.
Yeah, I think my first answer is the same. I think it's wanting to communicate better is the first step. It's not just paying attention of how to communicate, make you better. And then it was useful for me to have how to say it, feedback environment. So I start doing data communication on science communication on a blog. I start blogging, and that is useful because you had a lot of feedback. You are writing, and some pieces work, and other pieces didn't work. Some titles are better, some tweets are better. So having this kind of environment that it's just a blog is maybe not the thing now, but tweeting about the stuff you are interested or whatever the environment, but having this kind of practice. And then just another thing, I think it's useful. It's not necessary at all, but I think it's useful to learn how to program, to be a coder. So coding is also useful for a lot of economic stuff. So maybe you are doing it, but the investment of learning how to code the better you can, I think it's also useful for data work in general. Make you quick, and you have to be quick to be in the big difference between journalism and academia is the time constraint. So if you are going to be dealing with the public, you have to move fast. So I think that programming it's a good investment.
So one of the lessons that I took from your presentation actually was this thing about Twitter being very useful because you have immediate feedback of what's working and what is not working, right? So it can be a great, I have many students that ask me, why are you in Twitter? Are you in Twitter or not? Why are you there? Well, one of the lessons is I'm on Twitter because it helps me learn how to communicate. I mean, it helps me learn, how have instant feedback about things. The point about coding, I think it's crucial, and I think that's related to what Claude is saying on the chat, in which she's saying, look, we are all saying that communicating is very important, but we perhaps ourselves, we may not be that good as communicators. So how do we, before teaching how to communicate, we have to learn how to communicate, and that's important, right? We should have some formal training on this, which, by the way, links to the point in which, of course, one way to teach how to do good communication is by having wonderful charts and wonderful presentations in your seminars, etc. People see it, but I would say when you think something is particularly valuable, when you're presenting a particular paper, say, oh, this graph is good, and I think it's good because of these reasons, right? That's a way to start, so that at least students start asking the question themselves. Can I improve this? In my experience as an advisor, I always have, it's very puzzling to me to ask to have to tell the students the very simple issue of, why a pie chart? Why didn't you even think about the type of graph that you're presenting, which is one of the lessons that I think we are learning today, right? But yeah, some formal training also for the academics before we teach the students would be important, I think. What else? Yeah, sorry, I'm reading as we are speaking. So if anybody wants to catch on.
Just to add to what you were saying, I'm talking about communication and try Twitter and try to write in a blog, how to write better. And this is the simple stuff for us. The challenge here is how to communicate in Twitch or in Instagram. So we are talking about the old times thing. So how to make videos to engage with our audience. So the challenge of communicating to a general audience in 10 years from now, it may be much more difficult. So we should start with the basics, at least.
No, that's a good point, and it's evolving very, very fast, right? I was thinking at the beginning of this session, I was amazed by, we have quite a large audience today in this call. I was thinking about what was going on in the very first Zoom calls we were having a year and a half ago when the pandemic started. And today we didn't have to ask anybody to mute their microphone, right? So we are also learning how to communicate online. We have to do it once, very little per second, but just one person. So we are learning how to do these things, and of course, the technology is evolving and is changing, right? I'm part of a blog about economics in Spain called Nada es Gratis, and I can't tell you how many times we've been told that blogging is dead and nobody reads blogs, and that now that the academic discussion is on Twitter, but still the blog is going strong and we are making our best numbers. And actually one of the reasons why we're doing good numbers, I think, was because at least in the very last few months, is because we moved into also video blogging, right? So that was, and it's something that it took a while. It took a very long time. We are very strict about what we use, and it took a long while in which we were trying to convince ourselves that it was not only about writing on a blog, but it was also that videos was the best way to communicate, a better way to communicate. And now it's working wonderful, but it really took a long time to do that, right? And I think it's the same with the kind of software that you use, or the kind of graphs that you use, the kind of colors that you use in your charts. In academia, we are used to very simple graphs in the sense of we don't like too many colors, we don't like too many fancy things, we don't like too many fancy presentations also, right? Some of you were actually saying that the software that some of the panelists were using for the presentations was very good, and that they were doing a very good job. But sometimes some people use that same software and they get the audience dizzy because they move way too much, right? So it's about being open to technology change, but also learning how to use that technology properly. And I think that that's important. So technology, not for the sake of technology, but also given, why am I doing this and why is it useful? Why, as an academic, why am I on Twitter or not? What do I get out of this? What do I learn with being here? And not only about showing off and my ego issues because I'm on Twitter, right? So ask yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? We also have, if there's no one who wants to speak right now, we also have Jan Hoffler, who is doing a very interesting initiative about, not really about communication, but it's also about replicating results from research and then communicating about those replication. And I want to give him a few minutes just to talk about this issue, because I think it will be interesting for everybody. Thank you, Jan.
Hello, thank you for having me here. I was very happy. Yeah, I just wrote a message yesterday and then I was immediately invited. That was really cool. Actually, yeah, the project is not so much about communication, but it has something to do with it. Davide mentioned in the first presentation that from academic papers, often the data is difficult to extract because it's just there in the form of a PDF. And later on in the other presentation, it was mentioned that our World in Data has some overview of how relevant researchers using the data that they offer. And in the replication wiki, we give an overview of empirical papers and their data availability. As most of you will know, in many journals nowadays, data and code are asked to be made available. Of course, that's not always possible since, for example, sometimes proprietary data is used, but then at least you have to describe how you got that and how someone else could get it. And we give an overview of for which papers this is available, and also if there's already a replication and what results were found. And we have some resources that are quite relevant, I think, in this context here. For example, we have an overview of data sources that we identified in the different empirical studies, also of the software that was used, also of useful tools. Useful tools here is not so much about data visualization, but more about data storage, for example, but could still be interesting. And I've used this a lot for teaching at different universities around the world with students, and just to, in my experience, we even taught this to undergraduates. And in my experience, a big problem is that during undergraduate studies, the students don't get too deep into research, and then they just take published research as the results they take them for granted, because they think it's published. There was a reviewer. Most students, even at the PhD level, are not always aware that the reviewing process doesn't include checking of the results. Usually the reviewers don't look at the data and the code and check if everything makes sense, and they just look at the results and think that probably if it's made available, then it should be okay. And the replications, it's very difficult to publish replications. So even if I know a lot of cases where there are strong errors in papers, but this doesn't get shared. And yeah, in my experience, this can be a good resource to maybe help students get a bit more skeptical about research, but also to learn how to improve and make their own contributions. Probably most of you will know about this case of Thomas Herndon, who found an error in a study published in the American Economic Review Papers and Proceedings that had quite some influence in politics. And there's still a big discussion whether that error was relevant. But I mean, if even a PhD student can make such a contribution that leads to a global debate, I think that's quite motivating for students. And I hope many of you will find this wiki useful. Everyone can contribute. It's a wiki, so you can just register and then make changes as you like. We have already more than 300 registered users, and it's expanding rapidly. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jan. So you copied all the resources on the chat. So everything is on the chat that we will make available. Alvin has been raising his hand for a while, and I didn't give him access. So
not a problem, Pedro. It was just a very simple observation, really. I was just kind of reflecting on how different economics was when I learned it in the 1980s and now. And there's lots of differences, lots of changes that have happened in that time, but probably the most profound one is the empirical turn and the availability of data and the availability of techniques and the ease with which we can use those in teaching. I remember that there was in the pedagogical literature in economics, there was a big thing about threshold concepts for a while. What were the concepts that economists needed to know to kind of enter into the world of being an economist? And they tended to be very theoretical. It was the concept of marginality, for example, and elasticity. And, once you properly understood those concepts, then, you would be admitted into the fold of economists. And I'm wondering, increasingly, this conversation that's been happening in the chat about econometrics and data teaching on the one hand, and then theory teaching on the other hand, and whether there's been a profound shift in the kind of grammar of economics. And so, communication with data is now really part of the essential grammar of an economist's sort of set of tools, rather in the way that the concept of elasticity is, or the concept of marginality is. And if that's true, if there has been that profound empirical shift, then perhaps data and, rather in the way that you teach in economics literature undergraduate to write an essay, communicating with data is really the bread and butter of what all economists should be able to do right the way through their programs. So is this something that we ought to be teaching from day one in principles courses, and perhaps even in many other courses? It raises a really important question, though, which is what do you, and it's the ever-present question, which is what you take out of a course in order to make room for all the things that people have been talking about, like coding, creating these sorts of graphics, learning about prioritization of data. Anyway, that was just the observation I was going to make, Pedro. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Alvin. So some of you were commenting on the chat, and I will end up with this, saying, somebody was saying, the less we give to students, the better. The best we can do for them is to help them to help themselves. So I think one of the, so Eileen, I think you were saying this. I think one, or Tim was answering to Eileen in terms of this, sorry. So I think one of the lessons, or one of the things that I learned from this session today is that perhaps it is important to let the students, they have to find themselves, and research is also about learning how to learn, etc. But also one of the things that I'm taking away from this session is that at least we should implant in their brains the question of, is this the best I can do? Just ask yourself, how can I learn, not only where do I have to learn, but what do I have to learn because I don't know about it. I don't know that this graph perhaps is not the best, that the placement of this chart is not the way it's communicating better, etc. So at least, have the intellectual curiosity of ask yourself, where could I find the resources to learn how to do this better? And I think that's a nice balance between the two sides of the debate that I'm seeing on the chat. Because of timing issues, I think I'm going to hand it back to Alvin, if there's nobody else, to close the session and actually introduce a little bit the activities that we are planning and we are currently doing in the teaching committee, because there are some novelties and hopefully you will be interested in that. So Alvin, please, 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Pedro. And let me just first of all thank people on the committee, so Marco, Cloda, Eileen, Pedro, for the organization of this session. Of course, Gemma as well, who's done a profound job in the background to make this work, but also most importantly, the speakers, Davide Esteban, who's not here, but hopefully he'll catch up with this at some point, Kiko and Marco and Enrico as well for their presentations, a very stimulating presentation. So I just wanted to have a few minutes really just at the end to, as Pedro said, just to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing as a committee over the past year. And most importantly, we've had some students from UCL, Abbas, Amin, Veronica Hera, and Shivam Gujral, who are on this call actually, and I want to thank them as well for all the work they've done in developing the website this year. So it has just gone live, but it is very draft at the moment. I'm not going to, in the interest of time, I won't show it to you on the screen just now, but if you go to the EEA website and you go to the Education Committee page, you'll see there's an evolving kind of structure, there's new links and so on. And two things I'll just draw your attention to. One is that we are starting to put a lot of teaching resources there. Many of these resources are linked to other organizations like the Economics Network in the UK, for example, and CTAIL in the UK and UCL, and we'll be linking to existing resources. But these are there to help teachers of economics generally. We're going to try and categorize those so they'll be of most use. But the other thing I really want to draw your attention to is we've been with the students I mentioned, we've been developing a set of videos, and these are very short videos in order to try and get a sense of what people are doing, the exciting things that people are doing across Europe in their teaching. We've been doing very short, and they're deliberately very short, interviews with academics all around the place. And if you know anyone who's doing anything interesting, they may want to be part of this series. So these are short videos. We're going to launch them over a period of time. We've done about I think about 9 or 10 now. The first 2 I think are available. They're linked at the moment. They're on YouTube. I think the idea is eventually they will actually appear on the EEA's website. But you can go and watch those first 2 immediately, and over the next few weeks, we'll be releasing more and more. And so we hope that this will become a kind of institutional part of the Education Committee's website there. So that's the website. And then the only other thing I really wanted to mention at this stage was that we are planning to also do a couple more things. One is that we're going to have some awards. And again, just continuing this theme of the great work that's being done in places around Europe that we don't necessarily hear about and know much about. In order to try and promote and disseminate some of this, our intention is that we're going to launch a prize, an award, and it's going to be called an Innovative Teaching Award. And the details of this and the criteria and so on will appear on the website shortly. And we'll be making this award. We'll be making this award for the first time in the next year, and we're looking at a timetable of around Easter for submissions and nominations to that award. We're also planning to have a kind of an award running alongside that, which will be for a kind of seed corn grant. So it's a little bit of money to try and get people to develop an idea that they've been working on. So details of both of those things will be on the website very, very soon. So I'd urge you, please to have a look at those and pass the information on to anybody else who you know is doing good work in education and economics that may be interested in that. And the only other thing I wanted to just make you aware of is a plan that we're hatching at the moment to develop some training or a symposium at some point in the year in spring. And we haven't yet worked out precisely the details of that, but again, they will appear on the website. So the upshot of what I'm saying is we've got a shiny new website. Please go and have a look at it. There's a lot of stuff there already, and there'll be more things coming shortly. So with all of that being said, and with all of those people that I thanked being thanked, I also just want to thank everybody who's attended today for your contributions. And I'm just going to quickly ask my fellow committee members if there's anything I've missed, and if not, then we'll close the session. So no, Pedro, Marco?
I think we're fine.
Okay,
All good.
everything? Good, great. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much. It's been certainly very enlightening for me. Hope you've got something out of this. And as I say, please keep in touch with us through the website. That's going to be a kind of, so we don't just leave it on an annual basis for us to sort of have a relationship with people who are interested in teaching across Europe. So we hope to see you, contact you, and we hope that many of you will make contributions and submissions to the awards that I've mentioned. And hopefully we'll see you next year. Have a great weekend. And if you're in the UK, have a good bank holiday weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.